There are big changes going on in the buildings we live, work, and play in. The built environment, as it's called, is responsible for about 42% of the carbon emissions in the US, if you can get your brain around that, and it needs to get down to zero. On top of that, the COVID economic crisis that forced everybody to literally work from home has cut commercial occupancy rates dramatically, even to the point that some is being turned into housing or other uses. And of course, the federal government has allocated billions of dollars, trillions of dollars actually, and incentives in federal funding and incentives for buildings to get to that net zero goal with the Inflation Reduction Act, Infrastructure Investment Act, and CHIPS Act. So where are the business opportunities? How will all this transform where and how we live, work, and play is the question we're going to talk about today. And we're going to find out from a woman leading the way at a company that has literally been transforming our infrastructure for 140 plus years. Yeah, boy, do they know cycles. So grab a notepad or laptop to take notes and listen up. Welcome to Electric Ladies Podcast. We bring you insights and tips from remarkably innovative women about corporate responsibility, energy, sustainability, and ESG related issues. I'm your host, Joan Michelson. We talk about innovation, leadership, business, technologies, and careers, always bringing a new perspective. Find us anywhere you like to listen to podcasts, on our website, electricladiespodcast.com, and through my Forbes work as well. And please pass it on to your friends. And if you like the show, give us a 5-star review. It helps people find us. So when we talk about buildings, that includes all the materials that go into them. Concrete, steel, insulation, heating and cooling systems, indoor air management, windows, doors, walls, furniture, lighting. Look around you right now and think about all the things that go into where you're sitting or the building you're looking at if you're outside. The entire life cycle is emitting 42% of CO2, according to Architecture 2030's latest report. So clearly, if we're going to keep the planet from burning up, we must address the impact of buildings. But with the new funding, it's also a huge opportunity to improve our buildings, create interesting jobs, by the way, and grow our businesses and economy. So let's find out how one of the leaders in the built environment is tackling this massive challenge. I'd like you to meet Katie McGinty, Chief Sustainability Officer of Johnson Controls. Johnson Controls has been providing systems to manage the buildings we live, work, and play in, as I said, for over 140 years. Yep, think about all the cycles of urban development, housing types, lifestyles over all of those years. Katie brings about 30 years of experience in this work on all sides of the issue, which is pretty exciting for me to talk about: corporate, nonprofit, and policy. Prior to joining Johnson Controls, she was Senior VP of Oceans at Environmental Defense Fund, which is an interesting transition. She had previously been head of the Pennsylvania Environmental Protection Agency, and interestingly, was the first head of the Council of Environmental Quality in the White House under President Bill Clinton. Katie earned her Bachelor of Science degree in chemistry from St. Joseph University and a law degree from Columbia University in my hometown of New York City. She has numerous recognitions and awards. We would be here all day if I listed them. But suffice it to say, she's been Woman of the Year from the Women's Council on Energy and the Environment, which I've been a member of for a long time. One of the top 25 women honored for her climate leadership by GreenBiz and by Women Inc. magazine. And I'll stop there. So without further ado, welcome to Electric Ladies, Katie, and thank you for joining us.
It's a joy to join you for sure. And I'm just one of those gals when people start talking about buildings and brick and mortar. I can't get nothing more exciting to me. So I'm thrilled to join the conversation.
Well, I appreciate that. So let's start off with what Johnson Controls is seeing. What are clients coming to you with? What kinds of challenges do they call you up and, say Katie or somebody on your team and say, I'm wrestling with X. what do I do? What are the kinds of questions they're asking? What are the challenges they're coming to you with today?
So, we have a tremendous amount of positive momentum now, where the work and the stuff of buildings, which has forever and ever been about the basement of the building, is being catapulted up into the boardroom. And there are a number of driving factors for that. But just to take one very compelling one, the march that we have seen in businesses taking on climate commitments has been one of those forcing functions to bring the data related to buildings front and center. And the reason is when built, two reasons really. When buildings are 40% of global greenhouse gas emissions, there's no making that carbon commitment without taking on that 40% slice. Now, the other reason, and I think this is interesting in the evolution of how we tackle environmental issues, is there is a flip side to the bad news that buildings are 40%, and that is that there is a whole heck of a lot of inefficiency to cut out of those buildings. And so as we think of the enormity of the climate challenge, buildings are that rare space that actually taking action, cash flows, is accretive to your bottom line because you're cutting out a whole lot of waste that otherwise is just a burden on your bottom line.
Oh, that's really interesting. So it's beyond energy. It's kind of energy savings, but beyond that even. So what is that? So are those the kinds of things like that companies are coming to you with? I mean, are they coming to you and saying, we see all these billions, trillions of dollars, how do we tap them? Or are they coming to you and saying, we just looked at our energy bill and it's crazy, or energy prices are through the moon, or our investors are pushing us? What exactly what's the driver for them wanting to do net zero related projects?
Yeah. So one of the keys is, as we touched on, is that double and sometimes triple digit year-on-year increase in the number of companies that have stepped up and made commitments. Interestingly, the world we live in is pretty interesting right now. So there actually are some other dynamics outside of the climate agenda per se. For example, companies coming out of the COVID years needing to regain where they were from a production, from a productivity, from a throughput point of view. And what they're finding is, well, hold on, we've got a whole lot of capital plant and equipment that's not up to snuff if we want to go from 0 to 60 and get back fully, in the game. At the same time, a third key piece is that we could fill the room with economists who have prognosticated as to whether we're heading for a recession, a hard landing, a soft landing. I think in the C-suite that largely translates into, I got to be capital conservative. Capital preservation is king because I need to keep my options open. So you put that together, and when you have some solution sets that dramatically can improve the performance of infrastructure, modernize infrastructure, while dropping significant dollars to, again, that bottom line, that becomes a very interesting solution set to bring from the bottom to the top of the agenda.
Well, I love that. That's really interesting. And I would also posit that it's helping them get the bodies back into those buildings, because people don't necessarily a lot of people don't want to go back into offices. And it's funny, I've also seen research that says, well, they don't want to come back in, but when we make them come back in and they get there, they go, oh, I kind of like being in the office.
Yeah.
It's funny how that works. But are they, I guess what I'm trying to get to is, I understand the value proposition And I understand that they need to ramp up quickly. Need to get their whole production line in whatever work they do up and running. But what makes them want to invest in this stuff? Are they concerned that their plants are going to be underwater or wiped out in a hurricane? Or are are investors, activist investors or others, saying, how come you haven't reported X? Or like, what is it that's really pushing them?
Yep. So, Joan, I would say that we have a pretty unique coming together of very strong market push and pull.
Okay.
And so on the push side, it's really a constellation of a couple of three very essential business fundamentals. So a recent survey asked CEOs, look, the world's kind of a cacophonous, crazy place. Are you really sticking with the sustainability stuff now? And 70% said yes, because sustainability had proven its financial value.
Mm-hmm.
So what's that all about? And here's the business fundamentals. It is about that cost cutting across the board and identifying and driving out waste. But it's much more than that. And I think much more interestingly, look, businesses are in an existential competition for the best talent. And I think that generations of employees, not just the youngest employees, but many are now making clear, hey, I can go anywhere. It's been an employee's market. So I want to be with a decidedly value and purpose-driven company, and you need to show me your bona fides in that regard. Now, at the same time all that's happening, let's talk about cost of doing business. So Mother Nature's been shaking her fist something fierce. And insurance companies have not been oblivious to that. So if your assets, to your point earlier, hey, if they're in Florida, they're in Texas, Louisiana, parts of California, all of a sudden that insurance is either not available or the premiums are exceedingly high. And shareholders are saying, well, that's not abstract for us because those are our assets. And we need to see our assets future proofed. So, this is the language of the C-suite, Joan. This isn't the feel good, let's do the right thing by the environment. This is about the best talent, the ability to have continuity of business, and the ability to have addition and not subtraction in terms of those willing to invest in the future of your enterprise. So I think it's become a powerful market pull, market push in terms of people wanting to and needing to pay attention to the space. The pull is something I think you also alluded to, and maybe we can get into in more detail. But in terms of the incentives that are now out there in the US, in Europe, and in many places around the world, it's never been a better time to say, let me avail myself of the hand up I have here in grants and low interest loans and other incentives that have been put in place to really try to accelerate progress in this regard.
Thank you for that. Yeah, that was really where I was going to go next, because I'm finding I have clients who come to me and say, I've got a board that's intransigent and they don't see the business opportunities for us with this new funding and the coming SEC rules, et cetera. And some of them are very conservative and they don't want to, they want to be as far from the word progressive as possible. And so they're asking me to make the case for them, which is really interesting to do. And so I'm wondering if you're finding that companies are needing to have that case made, and if they are tapping into the Inflation Reduction Act as to expedite, they're doing it. In other words, I know companies and some of my clients are saying, well, we've got, there's this money, there's funding and tax incentives now available. We might as well. kind of thing. So are those incentives really expediting projects, or are they also saying, oh yeah, by the way, we can get it funded?
No, I think we are now seeing the whites of the eyes of the major impact that the Inflation Reduction Act is going to make. So, we've had a delta of time since passage, year and a half or wherever we find ourselves here, to the implementation regulations and the fleshing out of the various programs that will be the deliverers of the dollars and cents. And the good news is that those programs are now largely in place. And so in our own book of business, I will certainly say that we have now seen that switch flipped in terms of the dollars aren't just hypothetical, theoretical, on their way, checks in the mail, but actually those dollars are starting to flow for sure. Coming to your larger point, and I think you very accurately describe where various people find themselves in terms of, well, geez, is this something we want to get involved in or not, or people are conservative, etc. Look, some old ideas die very hard, right? And underlying some of what you described is an old notion that if it's good for the environment, it's bad for the economy. If it is going to do the right thing by way of air, land, and water, it's probably going to cost me profits or it's going to cost me jobs. And I think what we have is maybe a realization that that's never been fully true, but certainly now technology is delivering a universe of possibility like we never had before, and that can appeal to what a broader variety of senior players might find to be persuasive and, in fact, insisting of them getting involved. So I'll give you some examples. You mentioned offices. Let me switch different example. So hospital. So you're a hospital today, one, coming out of COVID, a lot of hospitals are very cash strapped. So we get back to that ability. For example, Johnson Controls will provide dramatic emission reductions, but either with no upfront cost in terms of capital to build the upgrades, because we securitize 20, 30 years of savings that come out of the upgrades being made. So it obviates the need for upfront financing. So that's interesting then to a hospital that no longer has the additional revenues from government because thankfully, the public medical emergency or health emergency is over. But still, can we go even a step further to the real core of what that hospital is about? Hospital wants to save money. Hospital wants to do the right thing by way of climate change. But a hospital exists to make patients well. So if we can go to that same hospital or that board and say, look, we're going to save you 50% on your energy bill. Well, that's nice. Good. By the way, the technology we will use to do that is about digital. It's about data. It's about sensors now. And so the same temperature and humidity sensors that will help us optimize the HVAC detect and destroy viruses in the air.
Oh,
Humidity sensor detects and destroys. So wait a minute now, does that mean Mrs. Smith is going to go home in 2 days instead of 10 days and without a hospital-acquired infection? Now you're talking my language. Or let's think about somebody who is very concerned that especially in the mechanical, the electrical, the plumbing types of skill sets, that they're seeing their workforce retiring. They're not seeing so many young recruits coming in to fill the void. They're hugely concerned about that from a continuity of business point of view. With technology now, if we can come in and say, hey, yes, we can help you cut your carbon, cut your energy bills. But by the way, we do that with digital platforms that connect your operating systems so that you will have a remote operations center supporting and backing you up in the operation of your building, and where you needed 100 people on site, now 10 people on site backed up by that connected, data-driven remote operations center is a force multiplier to your workforce like you've never had before. So the trifecta of technology in decarbonizing buildings, which is efficiency, electrification, and digitalization, is allowing us now not just to dial down the bad of emissions and energy waste, but dial up the good of unleashing the strategic purpose and potential of the organizations you're working with.
I love that. And that goes to, well, I was going to go with you next, actually. So thank you for the segue. Is a lot of times the data and the systems that we put in to do the reporting, for example, and to know whether we're actually reducing the energy consumption 50%, for example, or reducing or improving the air quality, also provides data that can help with strategic business decisions writ large. So, for example, how often does it happen that maybe your clients say, well, okay, we'll do this because we've committed to net zero and we have to report on it and we're publicly traded or whatever, and we see the SEC rules coming out and ISSB, et cetera. But then when we look at the data, we see that, oh, wait a minute, maybe we have another revenue stream here, or maybe we can take the waste, the byproduct of our manufacturing system that we thought was going into landfill in an effort to reduce waste. Wait a minute, we can reuse that over here and make something else. I mean, Dell has done this, Intel has done this. Dell is now coming out with a 100% renewable energy computer, in part from clever people on their staff who found uses for waste byproducts. So how often do you find with clients today having this sort of happy moment of, wow, we found another, or you guys helping them say, we found another revenue stream from this data, we found another business opportunity, a new market with this new data?
Yeah, well, it's putting a smile on my face because literally this week, we are working with a storied company that has been the heart and soul of its community. And as someone who likes a nice cold beer, it puts a smile on my face too, because this is a 100-plus-year-old brewery with a very good beer, by the way. However, it was facing a real problem, which is that its internal wastewater treatment system is now also decades and decades old. And the price tag for potentially upgrading and replacing that is such that this inner city storied old brewery, it's not a big national brand or international brand, was beginning to wonder if its last days were flashing in front of it. So enter a dialogue with my colleagues, and that big problem is now flipping into a huge opportunity for them, because the metamorphosis of that wastewater is renewable natural gas that can be pulled from the wastewater treatment process, produced, and then sold as a new commodity, to your point, a new product for that company that I will tell you is going for very high dollar. Because even as we electrify buildings, we electrify operations, one of the tough nuts to crack at the end of that is the thermal energy piece. So when you can get a renewable natural gas, that's something that's becoming very attractive in the marketplace. And far from shutting this brewery down, now they're selling gas as well as suds.
I love that, and it gives them a new life. By the way, it reminds me, I was in Iceland last year. Where they brought me out to look at their clean energy initiatives, and of course, they're 85% renewable energy, the whole country. And one of the places they took us to, geothermal is the primary one there, although actually hydro and geothermal as well. Um, but they took us to a brewery that uses geothermal to make the beer, and I'll have to send you the picture. I have this. They have a mural on the wall in the brewery that is an illustration. It's almost an animation, really, of from the ground through the geothermal plant into all the way through the pipes and whatever, all the way to then creating the beer and what gets in your glass. So it's reminded me of that. I'll have to send it to you. I don't remember the name of the place, but I'll have to send it to you in case you get to Iceland.
I hope you will. Definitely the picture, and if you can add a beer or two in the package, I wouldn't mind.
There you go. There you go. So yeah, I love that. Yeah, I don't drink beer, but I enjoyed their pizza and the place. I have about 800 questions for you, but I'm going to narrow it down to maybe two or three more. And that is, um, first of all, in your CNBC interview, which was really interesting that you did recently in the end of last year or a few months ago, in the UK, you said that 70% of CEOs say that ESG issues are here to stay. So, first of all, I'm curious where you get that number from, what the research is, but also, um, who are those CEOs? What industries are they in? And I understand where you see the business value coming from, but if 70% of the CEOs are saying that, then they're seeing the business value someplace also.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, it is that multiple piece of the equation that really speaks right to business fundamentals that we were touching on before, which is, how do you do cost optimization? How do you outcompete everybody else for the best talent? And how do you align with your shareholders? And that's what those CEOs are seeing. They're even more recent. That analysis was about a year ago. More recent analyses. Fortune magazine, I think, was 500 different CEOs. Very similar sentiment, and those CEOs put numbers to the factors that are driving them. So again, 71% of those CEOs saying, look, this is about aligning with our shareholders, or this is about increasing our market share because customers want to be loyal, to brands that are leading in this. And so that's where those value propositions are really taking hold for those CEOs and for the C-suite. Another example, by the way, I know this is jumping back, but if you indulge me for just 1 second, in terms of, again, the opportunity we have here to multi-solve, to be able to move societies and economies forward in so many productive ways. So just about every community has a wastewater treatment plant. Every minute of every day, we throw away a huge resource in that wastewater treatment plant. And that resource is simply just the heat that is generated in the course of treating that waste. Now, you might say, well, is it very much of a big deal? How much of a resource is that? To give you just a little flavor of it, one community in Canada, it gets very cold in Canada. One community in Canada worked with us in deploying what's called heat pump technology. Heat pump technology is like a miracle machine that enables us to electrify building processes, and they are hyper efficient because they don't burn anything to generate energy. They collect rather than combust energy. And then key to it is no energy is thrown away. So thermal energy, instead of vented and just gotten rid of, is put to work. So this community in Canada, just by tapping that thermal energy that otherwise being thrown away fully is meeting 70% of its annual heating needs, just from tapping into something that was a waste. And
That's a
so
perfect example. Yeah.
a hospital in Alabama, for example, similar heat pumps, 78% reduction in the natural gas needs at that hospital, 34% reduction in carbon, 32% reduction in their utility bills. So these are reductions, and you're doing good for the planet. So at any rate, the multi-solve that we now can do with efficiency, electrification, and digitalization is really unprecedented and so exciting in showing the promise that the environment and business, to the extent they ever have to be at odds, certainly don't have to be now. And you're missing out if, as a business person, you're not embracing this agenda and making it yours.
Well,
Listen,
exactly.
I know I'm rattling on, but I feel that
and
every
you're
business, just like they have, every business right now has their best and their brightest and working groups saying, what does AI mean for our enterprise and our company? And how are we going to benefit from AI? They should be doing the very same thing with sustainability. See it as an incredible strategic force multiplier, and their best and brightest ought to be on it, putting it to work for their company.
I'm into that. I support that. I agree with you on that. So, you mentioned utilities, and I have I don't work for utilities, but I have a bit of compassion for them. And you are such an interesting intersection with Johnson Controls, really, with the work that you guys do. And utilities obviously are the hub of our collective infrastructure and the built environment and beyond. But they are also going through a massive transformation. And you guys have to work with them every day. So I'd love your take on this. When people start getting down on utilities and complaining, I look at them and I say, okay, so utilities have to completely change their operating systems to adapt to getting their raw materials from completely new sources that they don't quite know what they're going to be yet. They don't know when they're going to get them. They don't know what they're going to cost, and they don't know what quality they'll be. And they have to do it under the microscope of regulation, and they can't raise their prices because that's mandated by their regulations. And they also have to do it without losing a moment of service to anybody anywhere. How the bleep do you do that? I mean, a restaurant can close for renovation and open in the spring, right? So what are you finding that utilities I mean, how are they managing this transformation?
Yeah. Well, I think it's certainly not one size fits all, and in regulated as compared to restructured states, you'll see a lot of diversity of approach. But I think that, first of all, I think it's exactly right that you paint that challenge in the compelling way you did, because it is every aspect of what you talked about there is the reality that those organizations face every day. And they have an incredible responsibility. They have a public trust. They're not selling something that's expendable. They're selling something that's essential. And it has to be delivered without interruption and without any disruption on in every second of every minute of every hour of every day. So at the same time, they're facing something that also is a big opportunity for them, which is that this major piece of our climate strategies, we talked about buildings, transportation as well, is all about electrification. It's about electrification of new and additional whole segments of our economy that have not been the purview or the hunting grounds of electric utilities before. So it's a growth opportunity but one that they have to undertake with this incredibly important responsibility they have. To me, where the path forward lies is in much better sense of dialogue and partnership between companies, for example, like Johnson Controls, that could convert whole buildings into batteries that, if they could talk to the grid, would build and support the grid and provide resilience as demand spikes during the course of the day. It would be similarly, there are aggregators, out there, companies that then pull together projects like Johnson Controls can build. And so then you have a whole community of buildings that could magnify and become a battery for the grid. Or companies that do something similar, bringing electric vehicles into the equation, where those electric vehicles could be a resource for electricity reserves to firm up the grid during times of peak demand. We have a very balkanized electricity system in the United States. And I think we need some first movers who say, let's not let that hold us back anymore. And we're just going to open the door, and we're going to realize the shared opportunity and responsibility we have. So how can we support each other? Meet the need of climate action, meet the opportunity of new parts of our economy electrified, and do that seamlessly in the provision of essential service to our neighborhoods and communities.
I love that. Yeah. And Green Mountain Power did a lot of that under Mary Powell. She's great. I had her on earlier a few years ago too. She's terrific. She's now at Sunrun, I think.
Definitely a pioneer, Mary.
Yeah, definitely a pioneer. She's really terrific. Yeah,
Yep.
totally. So, before I let you go, there's a couple other things before I get some career advice from you. One is, I would be remiss if I didn't ask you about the Open Blue net zero system. And it sounds like those are those the systems that the companies you gave us examples of are using? I mean, is that kind of an example of that but is it open in terms of being open source, or what makes it open?
It is open. So OpenBlue is our end-to-end digital platform that enables us to hit that trifecta. To get net zero buildings, we need to invest in efficiency, electrification, and then digitalization. And so OpenBlue is our end-to-end platform that sits across the huge array of operating systems in a building, to enable us to optimize across those systems, as well as then it is the platform that can do things like talk to the solar on the roof and beneficially use that energy, or talk to the grid and become a resource for the grid, or talk to the electric vehicles in the parking lot. It's open because our system we have designed so that it is not exclusive to us in terms of, yes, it works with Johnson Controls, heat pumps and chillers and controls, but it will work with anybody's brand of heat pump chiller. And so it is totally open that way. And there are many projects in which we are bolstering the performance of the chillers of our competitors because we insist that we will make OpenBlue to be able to sit across, be agnostic as to the brand on that equipment. And just to give you a flavor for it, like to drive home, well, why is digital so important in a building? So let's say you rip out your old HVAC system and you put a new efficient one in. Well, pretty much overnight, that new efficient system can probably cut you 25, 30% in terms of the energy consumption in the building. But boy, are we leaving a whole lot of efficiency opportunity on the table. Why? Because even the most efficient, let's say, chiller is siloed and isolated. Because today, most buildings are totally analog. They're not digital. But imagine if that efficient chiller, instead of being unaware of the fact that there's no one on the fourth floor of the building, if that chiller could talk to the security system and the security system can say, there's nobody on the fourth floor, stop blasting and blowing up here, period. That gives you a step function increase in the performance of that building. And, when you also think about things like the ability to have predictive maintenance and remote diagnostics, so now you've got digital and data and it's detecting weird vibration, on that HVAC system. Well, holy mackerel, now it knows that that's a system that could go down. Talk about avoiding emissions. You totally prevent that. You roll a truck once with a technician that knows exactly the problem they're going after, instead of what typically happens today is, one, the system comes down, so then you're burning diesel generators to try to keep the building operating. And then you're also rolling trucks multiple times because they have to come and hunt and search what went wrong. And then they find out what went wrong and they don't have the right part on the truck and the truck has to go back and forth. We get to 70% plus emission reductions when we add to our efficient operating systems that open architecture, open blue digital platform. And hopefully that gives you kind of the real tangible connection to why that's the case.
Oh, that's great. I love that. Yeah, that makes total sense. And it kind of takes the sensors that sense whether you're in the room or not to a whole new level, right? Um, I'm thinking of other women that I interviewed that I can turn you on to, because there's some really interesting technologies that kind of resonate, that come to mind around this, which I'll share with you offline. But before I let you go, I like to give career advice to mid-career women. And what I want you, if you can, to think about is, these are women who are ambitious, who are educated, who have experience, say 15 years of experience, who want to advance in their career and make a lot of money, and they want to make a difference. And they don't believe there needs to be a trade-off. So what would you, there's so many routes to this, and you've taken, you've worked in 4 different industries. It's fascinating. So what advice would you give to a woman in mid-career who wants to make a difference and excel in her career?
So first of all, thank you for putting a spotlight, on this and this question. It is such an important question. And I think we all can see that for the progress we have made, we still haven't achieved that real rich diversity, around those board tables, around those senior leadership circles. And we're all the poorer, for that fact. I'd share 2 things. One is, I would say, a hard learned lesson for myself, and one that I still have to push myself to come out of comfort zone. And that is that I feel that women generally, myself particularly, feel like what we do has to be perfect. We have to get it absolutely beautifully right. We also have a sense that in many instances, maybe we are the first woman to do this, that, or the other thing. And then it's an even broader responsibility. You don't want to look foolish. You don't want to have let other women down who want to be able to do something similar to you, but people are discouraged because you didn't get it perfectly right. At the end of the day, what matters is relationships. And if you have a choice to produce a good, even if not immaculate, PowerPoint or presentation, whatever it is, and instead of investing the 5 additional hours by yourself in your office trying to get it perfect, you take a risk of walking it around to a couple of people and say, I'd really love your feedback on this. Take the time and maybe get out of the comfort zone to build those relationships. The other thing that a woman who I serve on a board with said to me recently, and I hope to do this much more often, is if you are a woman who is in one of those more senior seats, pay it forward a little bit. And she gave me a great example that I've tried to emulate. And that is, she used the word amplify. And I said, what do you mean? She said, just think of the number of times you maybe have been in a meeting where a woman maybe has chimed in an idea and it's crickets. And then the meeting just moves on. And sometimes somebody else will say something very similar later, and then everybody's tuned in. But often it's just crickets. And she said, I make it a point of saying, Sue just said X. Sue, I actually thought that was pretty interesting. Could you say a few more words about that? It might be something we could all run with. She just amplifies. And I think we can help our colleagues come into the game if we reinforce the foot they have put forward and we open the door for them to be able to express themselves more fully.
And what you're saying is we don't even have to agree with it. We just have to encourage a conversation about it and an exploration of the point. I mean, so often the best ideas come from, as you said in your first point, getting more input from other people. By the way, I'll have to send you a cartoon I have that I'm putting in a book I'm writing that is a conference table with a woman who's pitching an idea, and one of the men at the table says, Mary, that's a brilliant idea. Maybe one of the men would like to present it.
Oh, no.
And it's just, it makes you want to shake your fist, right? But it's true, and it still happens. And I love your point that it's often crickets, because that is what happens, is that somebody says something and there's silence. And the other one is that then that woman is discouraged from speaking up again or from making another point or whatever. And there's a story in J. Newton Small's book of where she interviewed a whole bunch of women in the political system in Congress and the White House, where the women in the Obama White House had a pact that they would, at the certain leadership level, that they would support each other. If somebody couldn't come to a meeting, they would tell other people about it. And if somebody, they would have each other's back. If somebody said something, they would amplify it. Mm-hmm. It's a very good support system, and it's a good model that we can really all use. In particular, it's frankly one of the reasons I do Electric Ladies, and the reason the show was originally called Green Connections Radio, and I changed it to Electric Ladies in part because I think women electrify results, that we supercharge results, and coming together is an even more powerful force. I explain all this on our website, but it goes directly to your point about amplify. So we are amplifying big time over here.
So thank you for supercharging how cool buildings are.
Yeah, well, they are. I mean, that's amazing. It's like infrastructure has become a sexy word, right? Exactly. So any final thoughts before I let you get back to your day?
Well, I guess, final thought would be that for those also, I think you had a second part of your question in terms of wanting to be engaged in work that is meaningful. That is, I think, a happy story for us, is that is no longer relegated just to the nonprofit or the government sector. And frankly, bring your whole heart and soul to whatever organization that you find yourself working in, because I think now especially people do want to feel connected to something larger than themselves. And it is a matter of business now to do business, do well by doing good.
Oh, I love that. Yes, absolutely. And as you said before, it's an employee's market at the moment. Mm-hmm. and people do want to feel connected to their work. Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Katie McGinty of Johnson Controls, for joining us today on Electric Ladies podcast. I am truly grateful for your time and insights.
Joan, I can't thank you enough. And to all of your listeners, go get them. Jump right into the deep end of the pool and let's make a difference.
Exactly. So hold your nose and jump in. So thank you. So what impact is climate change having on where you work, live, and play? Tell us on Twitter at Joan Michelson, and you might win a complimentary 30-minute coaching session with me through our weekly drawing. I've met some wonderful people in doing that. And please subscribe to our mailing list to stay abreast of our 400 plus talented, amazing guests like Katie, our blogs and career advice, and special coaching offers. You can subscribe on our website, electricladiespodcast.com. Thank you for joining us. I'm Joan Michelson. See you next time.